I don't think any of us think a 50% tariff on a good friend is where you should go. India is now a major player in the world, and it's not a developing nation, it's a developed nation. And that's going to come with some responsibilities. This is his negotiating tactic, which sometimes is a bullying tactic. And I understand, being the longest serving Indian American representative in Congress, I understand the psyche of the Indian people. They don't respond well to these bullying tactics necessarily. I think the longer term U.S. India relationship is so much more important than this short blip. Economic purposes, supply chain purposes, geopolitical strategic purposes in Asia, India is a major ally. What I would urge the Indians to do, and folks in the Indian government, is to
So the only thing anyone seems to be able to talk about these days, if you're in India, is the state of the relationship between the United States and India. We saw just today Donald Trump slap a 50% tariff on India, a 25% increase on the original tariff for purchasing Russian energy. We've seen Donald Trump pull closer and closer towards Pakistan, and we've seen him lambast India for being a quote-unquote dead economy, in his words. It's a stunning decline in the India-US relationship that even just a couple of months ago would have seemed impossible to any observer of the relationship. I'm joined by Representative Bera. He's congressman from California. He's been in the House of Representatives since 2013 and has been a strong advocate of the U.S.-India relationship. Congressman Bera, thank you so much for joining us here on HT. The only question I have for you to begin with that I think a lot of the audience will have is what is going on in Washington?
We try to figure out what President Trump does every day. What I would urge the Indians to do, and folks in the Indian government, is to not react to everything that Donald Trump does. Obviously, you have to take the threat of 50% tariffs very realistically. That's taking place in the context of Russian negotiations, taking place in the context of a lot of what President Trump says. I think the longer term U.S. India relationship is so much more important than this short blip. But again, we've got to work through this. Obviously, a country's going to push back on 50% tariffs. I think this is a place where cooler heads need to prevail. Congress should weigh in here and say, hey, let's take a step back here for economic purposes, supply chain purposes, geopolitical strategic purposes in Asia. India is a major ally.
Right. Congressman Bera, I have to ask, because, you are on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, you handle the subcommittee on the Indo-Pacific, you're a key player there. What are you hearing from your colleagues in Congress? Is there a sense that Trump is mishandling the relationship? Is there a sense of alarm about what's happening?
I think we've been on recess, so around the tariffs, we haven't had conversations. But certainly on the terror attacks in India in April, and then, de-escalating tensions. I think, President Trump claiming that he was responsible for the ceasefire. I certainly think Secretary Rubio played a role in facilitating dialogue. But at the end of the day, it really is India and Pakistan deciding, as two nuclear nations, we've got to de-escalate this. This is still a tenuous ceasefire. There's still a lot that could go wrong here. That's what I would focus on. That's what I would urge the Trump administration to support both India and Pakistan in moving this tenuous ceasefire to something more stable long term. So on that note, I think there's strong support for India. Certainly on the economic side, the U.S. India caucus remains extremely strong. I think there's lots of vocal support for the U.S. India relationship. And again, I don't think any of us think a 50% tariff on a good friend is where you should go. But I don't think slapping tariffs on our closest neighbor, Canada or Mexico, is also a good idea.
Right. But Representative, I have to say, because the mood in India is really starting to turn militant on the partnership. People who have been skeptical of the India-US relationship for a long time have come out in force and have basically said that, look, at how Trump's handling the relationship, he's being casually disregarding a lot of India's red lines, whether that's agricultural goods and market access for American companies when it comes to agriculture, what's happened, of course, with Pakistan, Trump claiming the credit for the ceasefire and then saying India and Pakistan would negotiate over Kashmir, just his recent comments about India's relationship with Russia, the tariffs on India for buying Russian energy when Europe also continues to buy Russian inputs. America continues to buy Russian inputs as well. There's a sense that we don't exactly know where he's going off of and what has triggered this. And there is also a sense that trust, I'm only channeling what Evan Feigenbaum, a close watcher of the U.S. India relationship, said when he said that you can get a deal, but the trust that the United States and India have tried to build over the last 25 years is effectively gone. Do you agree with that statement? How serious is this crisis?
I think Trump has certainly taken it in a different direction. Now, I think you have to couch it in terms of this administration. I think Prime Minister Modi, President Trump at times have demonstrated ability to have a good relationship. And I think they certainly have worked at it. Obviously, I'm working close with the ambassador in Washington, D.C. with Indian counterparts. Again, this is a long-term play. And yes, it will be a give and take. And yes, there will be some in India that say, hey, we're not ready to open up these markets, et cetera, because it's too sensitive to us. But that's some of the trade-off in negotiations. So India is now a major player in the world, and it's not a developing nation, it's a developed nation. And that's going to come with some responsibilities. Again, I get where President Trump is coming from to say, hey, we've got to have a fairer playing field. And some of the America First movement has changed that. That's a negotiation. But at the end of the day, it's both in America's long-term interest and India's long-term interest to have a strong partnership here.
So, Representative, I have to ask you then, where do both countries go from here? Because like I said, there have been conversations about a phone call between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. That obviously has not materialized. There's a situation playing out in India right now where the opposition parties have been on the front foot on this issue and have been pushing the government on taking a tougher stand against the United States. Like I said, the mood in India popularly is very militant now when it comes to the relationship. Are you personally worried that it will be more and more difficult as the days go ahead for us to reach some sort of resolution? And if there is a resolution, what does it look like?
Certainly. I think there's bumps in the road. I think this is not a high point right now. But again, if I think about this from the Indian perspective, their longer term strategic challenge is going to be China, a dominant China that's dictating the terms of what happens in Asia. India, Southeast Asia, other countries need a strong relationship, not just with the United States, but with Europe, et cetera. Europe is also deeply embroiled in what's the resolution for this Russian conflict. I think that's actually driving a lot of what Trump is doing. Again, I think this is his negotiating tactic, which sometimes is a bullying tactic. And I understand, being the longest serving Indian American representative in Congress, I understand the psyche of the Indian people. They don't respond well to these bullying tactics necessarily, and sometimes that's leading to the pushback. I would urge the Indians to say, okay, well, can we play a constructive role? They have lines of communication with Vladimir Putin that we don't, and perhaps take that role on the world stage to see if there's a way to find a resolution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict in exchange for a better trade relationship with the United States. That's what I would urge.
Right. Could I ask you about that question on the China side, though? Because we're seeing President Trump, he is talking about a meeting with President Xi Jinping of China. We also know that, of course, he's placing additional tariffs on India for buying Russian energy. China is, of course, the major purchaser of Russian energy at this point in time. We haven't heard too much from him on putting pressure on China. More and more, it seems like with China, the goal is to get towards a deal, and therefore India is the easy target. Therefore, we shall come down like a ton of bricks on India. So, and there is increasingly here in DC, at least since I've been here, a sense that we don't really know what Trump's position is on China. So the competition with China, which was that strategic glue between India and the United States, people are increasingly not certain sitting in Delhi what America's view is on China. Is it a competition? Is it not? President Trump and Prime Minister Modi came in February, said that, no, I don't want to compete with China. I don't want to take them down. What exactly is going on? What is the Trump administration's policy on China?
Yeah, so again, I don't want to get into President Trump's psyche because it seems to shift all the time. I'll give the congressional view, and I think this speaks to both Democrats and Republicans. We understand that China is probably our greatest 21st century threat. We're in a global competition. We're in geopolitical conflict. we want to avoid war, but we also want to have a rules-based order. It'll be different than the 21st century. What does that look like? India is a rising power. It's the fastest growing large economy in the world. I think, the reason why the Quad is such an important alliance is it does bring leading democracies together in Asia along with the United States. So longer term, I think it doesn't make any sense to play India off of China to try to get a deal with China. We don't trust Xi Jinping at this point. I don't worry that we're going to go to war with India. India, actually, their values align with us. We should be looking for those business opportunities. It has a mature pharmaceutical sector. We should look at how do we build redundant supply chains in India. Apple's making big investments in India. So there's a lot more that we could do cooperatively than in conflict with India.
Right. So then, Congressman, let me ask you again, where do we go from here? Will a phone call between the two leaders settle the issue? Like I said, the domestic politics, as you're very well aware in India, is not responding well to this. There is a sense that President Trump is trying to push India into a corner. There does seem to be, as is his want with a number of trade partners, there does seem to be a sense that he is bullying India, that he is trying to dominate India and push India into a corner, which India does not like at all. It's not responding well to that. You've seen the Ministry of External Affairs push back very strongly in some statements. So the strategic establishments in Delhi and Washington well. Where do we go from here? How do we de-escalate? If you were if, for example, you were sitting down with President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, what would you advise them? Practical steps?
If President Trump were to ask me what to do, I'd say pick up the phone, call Prime Minister Modi. You've had a good relationship in the past. Encourage the Prime Minister to engage with Russia to help see if they can be a partner in bringing an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What does that look like? India has lines of communication, longer history with Russia. Be a partner in bringing this to an end with Europe, the United States. Again, I think India could play a role here. In exchange of playing that constructive role, let's also think about how do we de-escalate these trade tensions? Where are the opportunities, the things that make a lot of sense? How do we also then work on maritime security issues, freedom of navigation issues? It's in no one's interest to have a war in Asia. So let's work together, not to pit India against China, but to say, what does the 21st century world order look like? What's India's role in that world order? So, I would look for those common opportunities and de-escalate the tensions. Again, President Trump, I don't expect him to pick up the phone and ask for my advice, but if he reads the Hindustan Times, this advice will be in there.
Right. Could I ask you one thing? Because we've heard a lot about the fact that the India-US relationship is a relationship that is bipartisan, that Republicans and Democrats tend to support it. But I have to say, I've been in DC for a little while now, and aside from you, and of course a couple of other representatives who are key members of the India caucus, we haven't seen much of the Republican Party come out to defend the relationship. We haven't even seen much senatorial leadership come out and basically speak out to defend the partnership. There's basically been, aside from some notable exceptions like yourself, no real people coming out and saying that, wait, this is crazy, we should not be doing this with an ally. What is your view of this?
My concern is that in many situations, the Republican Party has gone silent and they've just let Donald Trump be the spokesperson. That was not the case in the first Trump term. There were many Republicans, and who worked with us to push back and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not how Congress sees the U.S. India relationship or troop levels in Korea, et cetera. So I think that's a little bit concerning. I don't think anything has changed within Congress. I just think Republicans are much more reluctant to contradict President Trump.
Right. Could I ask you, what are you doing personally in terms of, working with the Indian embassy, in terms of working with people in Congress? Is there a way that you personally and people who are in the House of Representatives on the House Foreign Affairs Committee can steer this relationship into something that is looking less disastrous day by day?
Sure, absolutely. Again, part of this is actually speaking to the Indian media, right? This is going to be seen in India and in the press in India. It's also working with the embassy in Washington, D.C. I also hope to get to India. The best thing to do is bring a delegation of members of Congress to India to say, hey, wait a minute, here's how we're looking at this. Now, that's something I was hoping to do, because again, the India-Pakistan ceasefire is really tenuous right now. And They're not equivalent partners. India is a future long-term U.S. relationship, but how do we reduce tensions? What does peace look like? Now it looks like we'll spend a lot of time, if I am there in the near future, talking about tariffs and what does a trade deal look like? We've always wanted to have a trade deal with India. It's always been very elusive. Maybe there's an opportunity out of these tense times to have something better come out of it.
Right. Could I ask you about that, the Pakistan side of the equation, though? What is driving President Trump's thinking? I don't want you to crystal ball gaze or look into President Trump's psyche, but just in terms of what you're hearing about what the rationale is for inviting the Pakistani army chief to Washington, D.C., Marco Rubio again hosted the Pakistani foreign minister. I mean, India is very used to a relationship between the United States and Pakistan. That's not the issue. But to have it happen so quickly after Operation Sindoor and the India-Pakistan military clashes has stuck in some people's craw when it comes to the India-Pakistan relationship. And President Trump's statement that they were going to help Pakistan develop their oil reserves and then sell that oil to India, all of this has come across as deeply odd. What are you hearing about the Trump administration's thinking?
Look, I find it deeply odd as well. This is not orthodoxy for American politics. Democratic and Republican presidents would not have done this in the past. Again, I don't know if it's just a lack of thinking through how the optics would look in India, especially so shortly after the April terror attacks. Obviously, I understand that it did not play very well in India, and it doesn't help smooth over relations. So I don't understand what their strategy was there. I also don't see India and Pakistan as equivalent countries. India is a country on the rise with a fast-growing economy that will be a major player in the 21st century. Pakistan is a country that has the most domestic terror attacks in the world, has a failing economy, has real deep political challenges, but unfortunately is a nuclear-armed nation. So they're not equivalent partners here. And again, I would say that to the Indian public. I don't see it that way. I don't think most of my colleagues in Congress see it that way. But again, I think these are some missteps that the Trump administration has made.
Right. Representative, let me just ask you two questions because you've been generous with your time. What do you see as the equation on the Russia front moving forward? Is it that we've seen President Trump today say that he will probably set up a meeting with President Putin soon? Do you think that the tariffs will disappear if there is some movement on that front in terms of getting the Ukraine war finished?
Sure. Again, this isn't how I would approach this. I would actually approach the Indians to be partners in helping find a peace. And I have actually talked to Jay Shankar and others that this is a time for India to actually be able to step up and play a pivotal role in resolving one of the unresolved conflicts in the world right now, in war. India can be a key player here. Now, this conflict is going to end at some point. Again, we don't know what that will look like. The big question is, what is Russia's role going to be in the world? I mean, is it going to be welcomed back into the League of Nations and become a trading partner? If you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have said that's where the Trump administration was probably headed. India can play a role in that. That's not going to be easy because some atrocities that have taken place in Ukraine. But on the flip side, we don't want Russia to be a rogue nation that's isolated, that has a large nuclear arsenal that also is being pushed towards China. I mean, a Russia-China relationship is not in the best interest of India. It's certainly not in the best interest of the United States. So again, if I were advising the Trump administration, I would say, go at it differently. Make India a partner in peace negotiations. They have a long relationship. They have lines of communication. They have economic relations with Russia. And maybe they can help these negotiations move forward.
Representative, my last question to you then is just on the question of trust. And the mood in the public, as I said, in India right now. A lot of what has happened over the last week or two has conjured up some pretty terrible memories of what the India-US relationship used to look like, how acrimonious it was, how difficult it used to be. And there is a sense that that carefully herded trust over the last 25 years has been frittered away for a policy that no one in Delhi can seem to understand. how do you even begin to rebuild the trust after what we've seen over the last week or 10 days? You are likely to be in Congress for hopefully a long time. How do you start doing that?
I would tell the Indian public to be patient. Look at what Trump has done to our neighbor in Canada, a country that we've always really been integrated with. That's broken down. What he's doing to our partners in Europe. So I don't know what the strategy is, but be patient and let's play the long game here. And I think the trust and alliance that's been built up over 25 years, the relationship, we can't let that go based on one administration or another. We have to play a long game here. That's in both our countries' interest.
Understood. Democratic Congressman from California, Bera, who's been serving since 2013 on the House Committee for Foreign Affairs, sitting down with the HT and explaining to us, making the case for patience and for India and the United States to repair the relationship. And if I may be so cheeky to also say that President Trump should pick up the phone and end this. But thank you so much, Congressman Bera, for your time.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.